Hi there. So I'm Paul, and what we're going to do is we're just going to wait a few minutes while the participants get into the room. I can see the numbers creeping up. We're up to 13 already. So we'll just give it a minute or so for people to get into the room, and then we'll have a little bit of chat about English language A level. While that is happening, let me just draw your attention to the Q&A thing there. I mean, this is supposed to be a Q&A session. So from the very start, then you can get into there and ask me whatever you want about the course, how we run the course, etc. So, okay, we have 26 participants by the look of it for the time being. And yeah, get into the Q&A. So there may be some questions that arise as I'm talking. What I'll do is I will talk for 5 or 10 minutes or so about the bits of the course. And it may well be that when I talk, I answer some of the questions that you've got in your mind. I'm pretty used to the kind of questions that people ask on open evenings. I've been here at this college 10 years. I've done 10 open evenings, so I'm quite used to the sorts of things that people ask, both from the students, prospective students, and from the parents as well. Okay, so let me just say a little bit about English language A level and why I think it's a great idea to be taking the course. I mean, first of all, the obvious thing about English language is it's something that really, really develops your communication skills. So whether that be verbally or whether that be in written form, by the end of this course, your communication skills are going to be much, much stronger. So that sets you up obviously for any kind of university course that you might be thinking of going on to, but more importantly, for some kind of career. Okay, so the number one reason for doing English language, apart from the fact that it's a massively enjoyable course, is that it really does develop those communication skills. So that's the first thing I'd say. Second thing I'd say is that English language A level is quite significantly different to GCSE. See, GCSE, they really stripped it down. On the present spec, they've really stripped it down. They've got rid of the coursework elements. They've got rid of the more interesting elements, let's say to do with spoken language, and they've made it quite narrow, actually. And I'm happy to say that the English language A level has escaped that process. And so actually, you've got a lot of variety that's going on in the course. So yes, on the one hand, you've got analytical stuff that we're asking you to do. So on some things, you're going to be writing conventional essays. On the other hand, you're going to be doing all sorts of creative things. You're going to be writing. You're going to be doing narrative fiction for a start. You're going to be doing some short story writing. You are going to be reading and writing journalism. So, you know, there's quite a range of different kinds of writing that you do on the course. So I wouldn't like you to feel that an A level is going to be a similar kind of diet as to what you get on GCSE. It's very different. It's much more varied. The other thing I'd say is that on English language, what we're interested in is language that surrounds us all over the place. So unlike literature, where you're looking at specific literary texts, so obviously on literature, and maybe you've just been on a literature Zoom, obviously you're going to be studying the set text, the great works of novels and short stories and plays and poetry. In English language, what we try and do is look at language that surrounds us all of the time in all its wonderful forms. So, for example, we are looking at conversation, which I don't think you will have analysed at GCSE level. So we are looking at all the kind of hidden complexities in everyday conversation, including kind of implied messages. Okay, the kind of implicature and inferences that people make in everyday conversations. So that's a fascinating area. We're also looking at what's called blended mode texts. So things like electronic texts, say on social media, where the text is written down, but there are features of conversation that are happening. So we do a lot of analysis into that. And we ask questions like, is the growth of technology actually destroying language? You know, is language deteriorating as a result of new forms of technology like mobile phones or emailing, etc. So we do those. And we also, of course, look at written texts, both current day and older as well. So I think you'll feel that it's very different doing English language from English literature. Very different kind of texts that you look at. The other thing I'd say on the English language A-level course is there is actually a lot of scope for independent learning. You've got your coursework. So in the second year of your coursework, you're doing something called a language investigation, where basically you take hold of a whole load of linguistic data from somewhere, something that really interests you, and you collect the data and you analyze what's going on in that data. So it may be, for example, that you are fascinated by the language of your cousins, your 3-year-old twin cousins, and you're interested to do an analysis of the difference between them and the development in their language over time. That's what you could do for a language investigation. It may be that you're interested, say, in journalism, and you're interested in the way that different newspapers represent a single event. So in which case, you get a day's newspapers, let's say from the broadsheets like the Times and the Telegraph and the Guardian, and you'd be comparing it with the journalistic devices used by newspapers like the Daily Express or the Daily Mail or the Sun or the Daily Mirror. So it's fascinating. So those are the sorts of independent things that you can do on your language investigation. So that bit of the course, you're really working by yourself on the data, and I'm sort of tutoring you alongside you. Put alongside that the other coursework that you do, for example, the opinion article, which you're going to be all writing in the first year. So this is a persuasive opinion article on any given subject that you think your reader might want to be persuaded about. And then you've got the short story writing, which I mentioned before. So the main thing I'm saying is there's lots of independent work that's coming through there. The other thing about English language is because it's one of these well-known courses that everybody has done a form of English before, it complements other subjects really nicely. And, people who do English language do a whole range of different other subjects. I made a list here of all the different sorts of combinations that you get with English language. You get your real language people who take English language alongside English literature and something else creative as well. And incidentally, they actually make a very good fit because they are, although they're similar in the sense that you're analysing language forms in them, they're sufficiently different to complement each other. So we do have quite a lot of students who do both the language and the literature. So we've got that clump of students. We've got other students who do things like English language, film and media. And we find that those combinations work very well because those sort of critical skills that you're developing in film studies, where you're breaking down scenes of films, or media studies where you're looking at the devices that journalists are using. These are exactly the sorts of skills that you're also developing in English language. So they work together very well. And then we have the kind of humanities crowd. So we have people who are doing things like law and history and psychology and sociology. And so there are big bits of our course that kind of tie in so nicely with those because you have essay subjects to do. So for example, in the first year, you're looking at language diversity, and you're looking at the impacts on things like gender and social class and your age upon the language that you use. Now that ties in really nicely with, say, sociology. So humanities, and then you get other sorts of clumps of subjects, like we have lots of students who are doing health and social who are perhaps wanting to go into childcare, or maybe even wanting to go into teaching, like primary school teaching. If you are seriously considering going to primary school teaching, you've got to be doing English language, because in the second year, we do CLD, Children's Language Development, which is a study of that miracle of how children develop speech from birth up to 7 or 8 years old. So it's a fascinating topic with lots of theory that's involved with it. And we also in CLD look at children's writing as well. So it's the development of children's literacy over time. So if you have any kind of aspirations about being in education in some way, then English language is a really good course to do. Okay, what else can I tell you? I'll tell you about, yeah, well, destinations of people. So people have done the course, what are they going to do? That's an obvious kind of question to say. Well, I went through, I gave to my students last week a piece of paper in which they had to write down what they were intending to do after A level. And it was very enlightening, because here are the sort of top 5 things that people who are doing English language have put down on my list of things that they're going to be doing. Number 1, journalism. We have lots of students who want to be journalists in some form, whether that be sort of TV journalists or paper journalism or journalism on the net. So lots of them go on to journalistic courses at university. So lots of students doing that. As I said, lots of students wanting to go on into education in some way, whether that be primary or secondary. We have a whole load of students who want to then go on into law. They do law degrees, and that's really good for English language, because we have a module on English language in the first year called Language and Occupation. So it enables people to develop that side of their understanding for law. And then we have loads of students who go on to do psychology. And psychology makes a good fit with children's language development, because when we're looking at the theories of children's language development, let's say behaviorism and nativism, that's exactly what they're doing down the corridor on psychology. So that makes a good fit. And then what else have we got here? We've got things like speech therapy, for example. So people who want to work with children and work on their speech development. We do have a lot of students, of course, who go on to apprenticeships, so go straight onto jobs. So don't feel that inevitably, you have to go on into university in order to, from an A-level course. Okay, now I've covered a few things. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the Q&A thing. Now, let me just take some of these questions then. So what exam board do you use? Well, that's AQA, which for English language is the nation's favourite exam board. There are something like 16,000 students across the country who are on the AQA. So it's the biggest exam board. And we chose that deliberately because it's got the best resources. Okay. What's your favourite topic to study? Oh, my neck, that's a hard one. Do you know what? I think my favourite topic to study is possibly language change. So this is what we do in the second year, and this is where you look at how and why language changes over time. So you go right back to the very beginnings of English, and you ask questions like, where does this strange language come from? Where does the word English come from? So we look at old English texts and texts from the medieval period, and then texts from around about Shakespeare's time as well. And it's absolutely fascinating, because what you look at is the development of language over time. And really, when you're looking at the development of language over time, you're looking at how social attitudes and society has changed over time, because language is just a mirror on society. So it's absolutely fascinating. And as part of that, we also go abroad as well. Not literally, sadly, but we look at things like American English, Australian English, Singaporean English, Indian English, and we try to fathom out why this weird, low-status dialect from 1,000 years ago that only something like 1 million people only in this country spoke has gone to this absolutely amazing worldwide global phenomenon of like 1/3 of the population of the planet speaking it. So it's a fascinating area, and we sort of ask questions like, what's going to happen next? Where is English going to go next on its next journey? You have, for example, 250 million speakers of English in India, and that's compared with the population of the UK, which is about 65 million when I last counted. So, what are the forms of English that are going to develop in the future? So yeah, that's probably one of my favourite bits on the course, is about language change. Now we have another question from Lily, who says, which English should I take if I'm interested in journalism? Well, there are pluses and minuses with all of them. I mean, obviously, are you thinking whether it should be English literature or English language? Obviously, on English literature, it's developing your reading skills. So, you know, by the end of that course, you should be a very, very astute reader. And so those are vital skills to be a journalist. I would say on English language, what you've got in the English language course are bits that are directly about journalism. So on your paper 2 of the English in section B, you are given in the exam 2 lengthy bits of journalism where journalists are discussing some kind of linguistic features. And you have to deconstruct their arguments that they're using. So how are they using language to try and persuade you over to a viewpoint? And then in the last bit of that essay, that exam, I should say, you do your own piece of journalism. So, you know, the journalistic writing is really, really embedded in the course, as well, of course, as one of your pieces of coursework. So maybe a possibility is doing both Englishes if you're sufficiently interested in journalism. That kind of fit would work very well. Okay, are the jobs that English Lit and Lang lead to different? Not necessarily, no, because they're both in the same kind of category, aren't they? Because they're both intrinsically about language. But I mean, they both offer so much variety. So there's a whole range of different jobs that people go into, whether you're going to be a teacher or a lawyer, or you're going to go into marketing or advertising or business, that either of the languages, either language or literature, sorry, would be very effective on those. Katie's asking what grades do you need? Well, in order to get onto the, thanks for these questions, by the way, they're terrific, really good. In order to get onto the English language course, you need a 4, which is the old equivalent of a C grade. And obviously, in order to do a full program here at QE, where you're doing 3 A levels, you would need 5 level 4s in total. So we have a real variety in our classes. We have, you know, students who've got level 4s, we have students who've got level 9s. So we have a massive variety in the classroom, and that's great because we've got such diversity, not only of the grades, but of where people come from as well, because, you know, we have students coming across from Teesside, Stockton principally. We have students coming from Northallerton, Richmond. We have students in Darlington, of course. We have students coming from, you know, Teesdale and Sedgefield and all the rest of it. So it's fabulous for language because it sparks all kinds of debates about things. If you think of accent and dialect, which is a massive thing that we do in the first year in term 2, you know, we have the people in our class have such diverse backgrounds and they have such diverse kind of experiences of accent and dialect. It really feeds into the curriculum. So a bit of a long-winded answer there, but there you go. How long are the exams? They're 2.5 hours each. So in total, you have 5 hours that you're examined. So take your sleeping bag in and a pillow, I would say. So how many papers would we take all together in the exam? So it's 2 papers that you do. There's paper 1, which is called language and the individual, and you've got paper 2, which is called language change and diversity. So those are the 2 different papers. Okay, why should you do language over literature? I'm not saying don't do literature, because I would say both of them are very good. But what I would say about language is it has incredible variety. It lends itself to incredible variety. You're doing creative tasks 1 minute, next minute you're analysing a transcript of Graham Norton interviewing a celebrity. The next minute you are taking a bit of the Bible from the 17th century and trying to figure out how and why language is being used in that way. The next minute you're looking at a bit of Singaporean English in a newspaper and trying to work out the difference between British English and Singaporean English and why it's different. So what I would say is it's the variety in language which is really appealing for our students. So anonymous attendee says, what topics do you do each year? So when the students come in, when we've got them in the first term, we lay the foundations by doing something called the language levels. And this is where we take you through vocabulary, grammar, the sounds of the language, graphology, which means like the layout features of the language. And so you do that initially because you couldn't do the rest of the course without that groundwork. Then, as a bit of relief from doing all that analytical work, that's when you do the creative writing. So in the second half of the first term, you're doing short story writing. So what happens is that you read independently a whole range of different short stories. You choose one that you think, I love the style of that. I'm going to have a go at writing a short story in the same sort of style as that. And off you go and you do it. And we give you loads of advice, of course. You do drafts and we give you advice on the drafts. And you end up with a beautiful piece of work, which would equate to 10% of your A-level in total. So that's what you do in the first term of year one. And then in year one, you do a thing called language diversity. And this is where you're looking at things like accents and dialects. You know, so as part of that, you may be doing research into Scouse, for example, and you and the person that you're working with, then you're going to be doing a presentation to the class from a PowerPoint in which you're talking about the origins and the features and people's attitudes towards Liverpudlian English. Okay, so that's the sort of thing that we get up to on accents and dialects. That's part of language diversity. The other element of that is language and gender. So there's a heck of a lot of research that's been done about that, which is trying to figure out, are men from Mars and women from Venus, i.e., do males and females actually have different conversational styles? So we look at the theory on that, and then when we've looked at the theory, we start to look at the practice. And so we look at, let's say, excerpts from reality TV shows like Love Island, which of course I love, and we apply some of the linguistic theory to it. So are there gender differences in the way that males and females are using language? So that's all part of language diversity. And then at the end of the first year, that's when we do about discourses. So this is where you're looking at discussions and debates that are about language. So there's plenty to argue about because people always have very, very strong opinions about language. Like, for example, young people are responsible for making language go bad, things like that. So we look at kind of what's called prescriptive and descriptive attitudes to language. That's all just in the first year. Okay. All right, let's just move on to one or two others. Which English would best suit psychology? Well, again, we do have lots of students who do psychology and English language. And the reason I'd say it's a good one to do is because of that CLD, Children's Language Development. When you're looking at the psychology of students developing speech, then that's a similar sort of thing that you'd be doing in psychology A-level itself. So there are actually quite big linkages between the two. After all, the analysis of language is really the analysis of the human mind, okay? Because language is just a vehicle to express yourself in the human mind. So Scarlett asked, hello Scarlett, would you recommend English language for veterinary? You know what, I know I'd say this, wouldn't I? But I would recommend English language to go with anything. We do have a fair number of students who do English alongside sciences as well. And one of the key things is that on veterinary work, you are going to need very strong communication skills. There's no doubt about it. So when you get to the end of a 2-year A-level course, you know all the nuts and bolts about language. You know, you will be an expert in delivering language, whether that be verbally or in written form. So, you know, English would even go with sciences. I know the majority of our students are not doing sciences along with English, but we have had a significant number who've done things like sciences and gone on to be things like vets. So I would say the same thing from that question about would English language work well with biology and chemistry. Okay, every year we get students who do those sorts of combinations, not least because when we're looking at language and occupation, you know, we're doing special work there about subject-specific vocabulary, the kind of jargon that different occupational fields actually have. So there's a nice linkage there. Can you help with writing speed? I'm currently getting 25% extra for my GCSEs, and I wasn't sure if it affects my A-level exams. So every year we have some students who get 25% extra. So the Learning Support Department would take a look at you and you do some kind of assessments. And if they felt that you passed their criteria, then you would be getting 25% extra in your exams as well, which actually makes a massive difference, because remember I said, well, one single paper is 2.5 hours. So 25% extra on that is 37 minutes-ish, I think, something like that. How many people in a class? Well, that varies. I mean, I had a class last year that was 15. That's at the lower level of it. The upper reaches of the classes would be 21, 22. So sitting in my first year class at the minute, we presently have 21 students. What I would say in class is that we do a heck of a lot of group work, and we're crazy about mixing you up in terms of where you sit, so that you're not just sitting next to the same person all of the time. And we think that's really important, because if you're going to go out there in the wide world and be effective in the marketplace, then you have to be used to talking with different people. So you can't just sit there next to somebody that you went to school with for the whole year. You're going to have to up your game and sit with other people. And that's great for the atmosphere of the classes, because by the end of the year, everybody knows each other. We're having a party. Everybody is so at ease, and it means oral work is so much easier because people are willing to contribute, because they know that they're in some kind of safe environment. So the class situation is really nice. Now then, how many lessons would there be a week? So what you're getting here per subject is 4 lessons a week. 2 of them are an hour and a half and 2 of them are 1 hour. So in total, you're getting 5 hours of lessons per week. And then with that, you're going to get independent work, because you're going to get frees. For the first time in your school life, you're going to have bits of your timetable where it says no lesson. Now, I've just called them frees, but the college would call them non-contact time, because what we do is per subject, we are giving 4 to 5 hours homework per week. So although when you get your timetable, first of all, it seems that's good. I haven't got that many lessons, because you might have 2 frees in a day. Actually, you will find as an effective student that you will need those 2 frees per day, because we're going to be giving you lots of homework to be doing. What is the reading writing ratio like? Very even, I would say. In your standard lesson, you're doing some reading, you're doing some writing, you're doing some speaking, and you're doing some listening. So we make sure that in every single lesson, whether that be an hour or an hour and a half, you've got a good ratio of them. Some of the writing will be handwriting, because obviously we have to get you ready for exams where you have to scribble away very quickly. Some of the writing will be on Chromebooks or laptops, and our English language classrooms are furnished with units full of Chromebooks. Okay, so it's a good combination. How many pupils are in a class, and how many hours tuition a week does QE offer? I think I've just done that one. What grades do you need to take English language? Well, to take English language, you need a 4. A 4 is the equivalent old school of a C grade. And obviously to get onto a full program, a study program of 3 A levels, then you're going to need 5 level 4s or more. Okay, so it's a level 4 that's needed. What topics are year 2? I'm glad you've asked me that. Year 2 is children's language development. So that's the one where we are looking at the theories and the practice of children's speech developing over time. And then we're looking at children's literacy and how that develops over time. So we do that right at the beginning of the 2nd year. And then you've got your language investigation. So this is where you are working independently on some area of language that really interests you. I've got a selection here of questions from last year that people worked on. How do male performers on the reality TV show RuPaul's Drag Race use language to represent the drag community? Interesting. How does Milton, who's a 17th century writer, And the writers of the Bible use language in different ways to represent events from Genesis. How do the writers of the TV sitcom Friends use language to create humour in different ways? The world is your oyster on the language investigation. So you do that in November and December the second year. And then after Christmas, so in the last 6 months of the course, you do about language change. So that's what I was saying about how you look at the history of the language and how it's changed over time. And you also look at international forms of language as well. And you'll get an essay question. Like, for example, evaluate the idea that English is fragmenting, something like that. So, and the idea is that is English going to go the same way as Latin, where nobody speaks Latin anymore? So in 500 years' time, is the same thing going to happen to English, where it's going to just split up into different dialect forms? Okay, so I hope that's answered that question. Lucy asks, to study English at university, do you need to take both language and literature at A level? No, but if you're pretty definite that you want to do English, it's a good idea to do it because it covers all bases, isn't it? It'll show that you're very strong on your literature, but it also shows that you've got those linguistic skills as well. So if you're somebody who's thinking, I am definitely an English academic scholar, I perhaps, God help me, want to be an English teacher, then obviously the two Englishes would work very well. They complement each other very well. Is there story writing and creative writing in the A-level exam? In the exam, there is creative writing in the sense that there is journalism. So you get to read 2 journalistic articles, and then you get to construct your own opinion piece. Okay, so that is creative writing. There isn't creative writing in the exam in the sense of write a story about a fish. No, but you could write a story about a fish on your coursework. Okay, so because it's better to do it like that. It's a nonsense to do creative writing in an exam hall under those conditions, what do you think? Okay, what degree do you have to do at university to be an English teacher in a secondary school? Well, it would certainly help to do both your Englishes at A level, and what somebody like me did was I did my English at A level, and then I went on to do English language and literature at a university, and then I did a PGCE, which is a 1-year teaching course. So that's how most people do get into secondary or college teaching. Is the exam layout similar to GCSE? In some respects, it's similar to GCSE. You know, at GCSE, you get texts that you've never seen before. You get unseen texts. Well, it is the same on your paper 1 and paper 2. On your paper 1, they say, right, here's a current day text. It's a blended mode text of a discussion online on Mumsnet about home cooking. Right, so you're going to be analysing the different language features that are being used by the different participants on that. So you're going to analyse that, and then alongside that, they're going to give you a cookery book from 1829, and you're going to have a look at how the language there is similar or different to the current day language. So it's similar to GCSE in the sense that you get these unseen texts, but they're different sorts of questions that you get to do, and obviously because it's advanced level, the expectation is that you're going to really show technical knowledge. So you'll be able to deconstruct, for example, all the grammatical features that are going on in an early 19th century text. Okay, does the written coursework count to our grade? It most certainly does. And it's an 80-20 split. So 80% is the exam, 20% is the coursework, and that coursework is 2 parts. It's one, it's the language investigation, and secondly, it's the short story. I am aware of time because it's coming after 6:30. I'll just finish off with a couple more of these questions, and then if you have any other lingering questions, by all means, email me. I'll give you my email address in a minute. Is there any persuasive writing in the coursework? By jingo, there is. There is persuasive writing. So on the second piece of coursework that you do, it's called The Power of Persuasion. And this is where you go off and you research a hot topic. Let's say, for example, you are very, very interested in the notion of abortion in the USA and all of the debates they have about that. You will go off and do the research into that, and then you will construct an article for a broadsheet newspaper in which you show all of your information, but you also show your persuasive skills as well. Okay, so that's and roughly how many people take English language per year? This is the final question that I'm going to take. That's a really good question. On our second year, we have 102 students, and in our first year, we have 110 students. So at any one time in the QE, we've got over 200 students, which means that per year we have 5 classes, 5 or 6 classes usually. And in terms of the scale of English language compared to other subjects, it's probably about the 35 or 40 subjects that you get in English language, that you get in the college. It's probably about the 5th or the 6th biggest, which is great because, you know, you're going to get a range of teachers, not just me teaching it. You've also got Steph and Helen, fantastic teachers, and you get such a variety of different students. So I think that just about wraps it up. My email address, if you have other questions, is pheselton, that's P Heselton, that's H-E-S-E-L-T-O-N, Elton, at qeliz.ac.uk. That's pheselton at qeliz.ac.uk. And I really mean it. If you've got any kind of questions, any kind of points that you want to put to me, do so, and I will answer you as quickly as I can. It's been a pleasure speaking to you tonight. I hope that's been informative, and I hope to see you next year. Thank you.